Preface. In the name of God, the merciful and clement, Muhammad ibn Abi Muhammad ibn Zafar, the poor and lowly servant of the Lord, content to abide his holy will, whose sins may God absolve, thus writes. Gratitude to God is the noblest garment with which a man can clothe himself, and praise of him is the surest means to obtain the blessings of this life and the hereafter. Glory be to God, who gives us endurance as a pledge of success, and friendship as a refuge in misfortune. Glory be to him, who spreads an impenetrable veil over the mysteries of fate, and restrains the loftiest intellects behind the wall of uncertainty. To him, who leads the submissive by smooth and pleasant paths but drives forward the reluctant, until, stumbling and murmuring, they reach the goal of obedience to his decrees. He, whose name be praised, has said, perhaps your soul may loathe that which God has sent you for your special good. Blessed be our Lord, Muhammad, whom he has sent to bear witness and to proclaim good tidings, to admonish humanity and call them to holiness, and to be, by the will of God, a shining light unto their eyes. May the blessings of the Most High be showered upon him. And praise be to God, who created the children of Adam in such a noble image and caused the plants of the earth to spring up by means of the waters of heaven for their use, supplied them with abundant means of subsistence, instructed them through the ministry of the prophets, who taught them to distinguish right from wrong in their actions, placed both the mighty and the lowly under the governance of rulers, commanding all mankind to follow the wise precepts of rulers and holy men, and enjoining them to offer the former all the assistance in their power in the right way. Even as to rulers, he committed the execution of the most noble and arduous tasks. For the burdens of the rulers of the people are heavy to bear, and their office is full of labor. Their duty is to guard their subjects from those who would seduce them with flattering words, to secure them from all danger in their homes and on the highways, to defend them from their enemies, not only by war and violence, but by artifice and subtlety, to restrain the strong from oppressing the weak, and the wicked from injuring the upright, to instruct the ignorant, to cut off, in times of sedition, the diseased members of the social body, to levy on the goods of their subjects the dues prescribed by the law of God and employ the revenue accruing for the public benefit. For all these reasons, the work performed in one day by a just prince is more meritorious than 60 years of strife in the holy wars. For this reason, he shall also obtain an honorable place in the presence of God at the end of the world, as we read in the Musnad Sahih, on the authority of Abdallah ibn Omar. According to him, the Apostle of God said, just princes are seated on thrones of light at the right hand of the most merciful God, and there are those who have observed justice in their judgment and toward their kindred. And this tradition continues. One of the most genuine and authentic traditions of Ibn Shihab is the following, which he obtained from Humayd ibn Abd Rahman, who had it from Miswar ibn Mokrama himself. Miswar ibn Mokrama, having been sent to Muawiyah, the first founder of the Umayyad dynasty, later related the following discourse. Upon entering the presence of Muawiyah and saluting him, he questioned me as follows. Why do you make such complaints against the caliphs? Permit me to explain them. Replied I, and listen with indulgence to that which I shall say in their justification. In the name of God, replied Muawiyah, reveal the offspring of your soul without fear. Then I did not hesitate to show him all that I had ever said against him, and Muawiyah, having heard me, answered, O Miswar, I am assuredly not free from faults. Tell me, have you never committed any that make you fear eternal damnation unless you obtain the pardon of God? Yes, God knows I have, replied I, and the caliph resumed. What reason have you, then, for supposing that you are more worthy of his forgiveness than I, who have in my favor the merit of having so often concluded peace between people, caused the divine laws to be observed, fought in the holy wars, and accomplished so many great works that neither you nor I can number them? I am indeed so heavily laden with the burden of my duties that I doubt not God will graciously accept my good works and pardon my evil ones. Moreover, as often as I have had to choose between God and the world, I have always chosen God. In reflecting upon this discourse, said Miswar, I considered myself vanquished, and he never afterward heard mention made of Muawiyah without saying, May God prosper him. The author says, this is likewise the opinion of the wisest doctors concerning those princes who have not yet fully attained to the standard of justice. But this cannot be said of the princes of our own times, as they rarely manage to secure an honest and able minister, a learned and faithful counselor, one who should act with firmness and self-denial and do battle for the cause of God. It is moreover related that when Omar ibn Abd al-Aziz sought to restrain the arrogance of the race of Beni Merwan and the rest of the house of the Umayyads, and to ensure justice for the people at their expense and at the expense of their retainers for all the misdeeds they thought to commit with impunity, they assembled themselves together and hastened in great indignation to the palace. There they found the son of Omar, by the name of Abd el-Malik, and addressed him in these words: "Tell the commander of the faithful that we will not submit quietly to the regulation by which he despoils us of what was granted to us from the public treasury by his predecessors, and wrests from our hands the possessions we held to bestow them upon others, under the pretext that they were usurped by us. Why should he pretend to inquire into a matter that has been decided after mature examination by another monarch?" Abd el-Malik went instantly to report this to his father, whom he found with Amr ibn Muhajir, a man whom the caliph used in public matters. Omar, having heard him, fixed his eyes on the ground and remained silent and absorbed in profound meditation for some time. Then raising his head and turning to Abd el-Malik, he asked, "What do you say to this, my son?" And Abd el-Malik replied, "O commander of the faithful, go forward in the path that God has prescribed to you, even if you knew that the stroke of death was impending over us both." The caliph then inquired of Ibn Muhajir, "And what do you think of it?" Ibn Muhajir replied, "God said to the Prophet, 'Afterwards, we appointed thee, O Muhammad, to promulgate a law concerning the business of religion. Therefore, follow the same, and follow not the desires of those who are ignorant. Verily, they shall not avail thee against God at all. The unjust are the patrons of one another, but God is the patron of the pious.'" Upon hearing this, Omar exclaimed, "Praise be to God, who has given me you two to assist me and confirm me in my purpose." Thus, Omar ibn Abd al-Aziz considered it a great piece of good fortune to be assisted by two counselors at such a juncture. Alas, why is it that after so many generations, men have become more base year by year? We find, moreover, that the same Omar ibn Abd al-Aziz, having once written to Salim ibn Abdallah to inquire of him some details of the conduct, as caliph, of Omar ibn Khattab, which conduct he proposed to imitate. Salim answered him, "You do not live in the days of Omar, nor in the midst of a generation like that over which Omar reigned. Nevertheless," continued Salim's letter, "keep a strict watch over your officials, and make frequent examinations into their conduct so that they may fear you. Confirm in their office those with whom you are satisfied, and remove those who give you cause of displeasure. If you bestow or take away an office not from respect of persons, but for the service of God, you may hope that he will furnish you with assistants capable of seconding you. And this is very true, as is proved by the saying of the Apostle of God, 'To him who is imbued with the fear of the Lord shall be made,' etc., and so on to the end of this tradition. In continuation, I say that a king, noble both in deed and in purpose, and whose justice was acknowledged by all, commended for the habit of reflection and gifted with high intellectual powers, full of the love of science, which filled both his heart and mind, and addicted to the speculations of moral philosophy, beheld his subjects assailed by a rebel. This rebel, having succeeded in alienating a portion of them, already aspired to wrest the kingdom from him by force and had seduced away some of his most powerful followers. In the midst of this great tribulation, the king requested me to write a book of philosophy and erudition for his comfort. Seeing that I accepted the task and did not despair of being able to relieve him from the sorrow that oppressed him, it occurred to him that my work would not have the power to dissipate his sadness or afford relief to the affliction of his soul unless it were written in the style of Khalila and Dimna. This prince had granted me his cordial friendship, his generous beneficence, and a degree of intimacy which he displayed openly in public as well as in private. My soul recoiled from the idea of refusing him consolation in his trouble. I, therefore, proceeded to select from amongst the best and rarest of the writings of the Arabs on the subject of moral philosophy some narratives concerning commanders of the faithful and other yet more ancient monarchs. I polished up the rough gold of these narratives, using my utmost diligence to make their meaning plain. I inserted here and there, as in a nest, philosophical maxims, both maidens and spouses. I have united with them certain fabulous personages into whom I have breathed the breath of those lofty spirits, robed their persons in the mantle of regal bearing, bound their temples with the garland of lofty thoughts, and suspended from their shoulders the sword of Arabian or foreign dominion. I have opened every chapter with a few verses from the Quran and some traditions of the elect Prophet Muhammad, whom may God bless with praise and worship. Lastly, I have placed in it gardens for the delight of the heart and ears and weapons for combat against faults of habit or character. I have entitled this book, Solwan al-Muda fi Adikan al-Atba, Resources of a Prince Against the Hostility of His Subjects. The term, Solwan, is the plural of Solwana, the name of a shell, concerning which the Arabs believe that if a little water is poured upon it and given to someone in love, they will immediately recover. The Rajis has said, "Not even if I were to drink from the Solwan, should I find peace. Not even if I were rolling in wealth could I live without thee." The resources of which I speak are 5 in number: firstly, trust in God; secondly, fortitude; thirdly, patience; Fourthly, contentment, and fifthly, self-denial. I, therefore, now prepare myself to set forth the parables of various kinds that I have succeeded in collecting, all resting on the foundation of the original narratives translated into Arabic. These parables I have sought to enliven with the charm of eloquence and have introduced into them various philosophical sayings put into the mouths of animals. But first, I must premise one consideration to shield myself from the blame of the short-sighted and also from that of men of penetration who feign not to see. This consideration is the same recorded on good authority by the Imam and jurist Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Hussein Ajawi. He relates that the commander of the faithful, Omar ibn Abd al-Aziz, once attended the obsequies of a member of the house of Umayyad when the corpse was buried. He commanded those present to remain where they were, while he, uttering a cry, went forward into the midst of the tombs. His attendants waited for him a long time, and when he finally returned with red eyes and the veins of his neck all swollen, they said to him, "You have lingered a long time, O commander of the faithful. What has detained you?" Omar replied, "I have been amongst the sepulchres of those most dear to me. I saluted them, but no one returned my salutation. When I turned my back to depart, the earth cried unto me, Omar, why don't you ask me what has become of the arms? What has become of them?" said I. And the earth replied, "The hands have been separated from the wrists from the forearms from the elbows from the joints of the joints from the shoulder blades. And as I turned to depart, the earth called to me once more, Why, Omar, don't you ask me, what has become of the trunks?" "What?" replied I, and the earth resumed, "The shoulders have been parted from the ribs, and afterward, in succession, the ribs, the backbone, the hip bones, the two thigh bones. And in the lower extremities, the knees, the legs, and the feet have been severed from one another." I then sought to withdraw, and the voice cried to me for the third time, "Attend to me, Omar. Do you have no shrouds that will not wear out? And what shrouds will not wear out?" Replied I, and the earth answered, "The fear of God and obedience to his will," and so on to the end of the tradition. The author of the book says, "O reader, may God be gracious unto thee. Attend to these words that Omar attributed to the earth, to which, as inanimate matter, it appears absurd to ascribe flowery and elegant language. Omar, nevertheless, represented the earth as repeatedly calling upon another person, questioning, relating, and admonishing, which assuredly had never really come to pass. He used this language metaphorically because, having called to mind these philosophical admonitions, he was inclined to cast them in the form of a narrative, dividing them into questions and answers, attributing them to others, and putting them in the mouth of the inanimate earth because he perceived that the hearers would thus be more forcibly driven to reflection and more urgently moved to relate the matter to others. For if he had said, reflecting upon the state of those who are buried, I perceive that they must be reduced by the earth to such and such a condition, his warning would not have been expressed with nearly the same vigor that it derived from the original form recorded above. Likewise, Omar ibn Abi Bishr relates that Ali, the commander of the faithful, upon whom be the peace of God, one day haranguing the people and being interrupted by their clamors, descended from the tribune and began to speak thus, "These people, Othman, and myself, are in the same case as the three bulls, one white, the other red, and the third black, which lived in a jungle together with a lion. Whenever the lion attacked one of these three bulls, they, by uniting their forces, repulsed him, so that he was unable to devour them. But one day the lion said to the black and red bulls, 'The color of this white bull will someday cause us to be discovered in the jungle in which we dwell. If you would suffer me to do so, I would eat him up, and thus we should remain securely concealed, for no one would be able to discover us, seeing that your color harmonizes with mine and mine with yours.' The two bulls, therefore, closed their eyes to what was going on, and the lion, having devoured the white bull, remained with them. When he sought to attack them, they united together against him. Then, turning himself to the red bull, the lion said, 'This black fellow will bring disaster upon us, for his color attracts the eye. Contrive, therefore, to leave him alone, and I will eat him up, and then you and I shall remain here in safety. For the color of my hide resembles yours and mine are the same.' Accordingly, the black bull was forsaken by the red one and slain by the lion, who lived for a short time in peace with the survivor, until one day he called out to him, 'Oh, red bull, I am coming to devour you.' 'You, to devour me?' replied the bull. And the lion replied, 'I, myself.' 'Since there is no help for it, then,' exclaimed the unfortunate animal, 'at least wait until I have cried out 3 times. The lion thereupon drew back, and the bull cried, 'Not today, not today, does he slay me. He slew me when he devoured the white bull. He slew me when he devoured the white bull. He slew me when he devoured the white bull. Even thus, continued Ali, was I lost on the day of the slaughter of Othman, and this he repeated 3 times. The author says, the example here alleged gives abundant evidence of the lawfulness of the species of fiction which I have undertaken to relate. To the same effect, it is well to recall that which is related of Nu'man ibn Bishr, the comrade of the Prophet. At the time that he governed the city of Kufa for the Caliph Muawiyah, the latter ordered him to give 10 dinars of additional pay to every individual whose name was inscribed on the rolls of the Divan of Kufa. Nu'man, believing this measure to be inexpedient, did not carry it into effect, and hence, one Friday, when he was haranguing the people from the tribune, they cried out to him, in the name of God, O Emir, give us the additional stipend. Do you not perceive, replied he, that the dispute between you and me exactly resembles that which came to pass between the hyena, the fox, and the dab, land crocodile. The hyena and the fox going to the den of the other beast called to him, O Abu Hasail, I am at your orders, replied he, and they continued, we are come that you may judge between us. The judge must be sought in his own house, replied the dab. And the hyena resumed, my eyes hurt me. Dab, it is the effect of the heat. Hyena, I gathered some fruit. Dab, a good thing. Hyena, and the fox ate it up. Dab, well, he took care of himself. Hyena, but I gave him a blow with my paw. Dab, so much the worse for him. Hyena, the fox gave me another in return. Dab, a noble animal will avenge itself. Hyena, now decide between us. Dab, tell a woman one story, and then a second, and though she makes a face over it, tell her 10. All these sayings are common adages and are to be found in all collections. Although the retailers of proverbs, while recording the saying of Nu'man, have in some degree altered the words. But I have chosen here to revive the memory of Nu'man and relate that which a comrade of the Prophet held it lawful to say when haranguing the people from the tribune in the assemblage of Friday, because, under such sanction, no one can find fault with the work I have undertaken. All Muslims, moreover, agree in admitting that the marvelous narratives devised by gifted persons are a lawful imitation of the specimen contained in the Koran, in the parable of the ant and the gnat, for all beings endowed with vital and intellectual faculties superior to those of the above-named insects enjoy them as a special gift of God, differing alike from animal instinct and prophetic inspiration. Thus, God, whose name be praised, has said, the Lord spoke by inspiration unto the bee, that is, he gave it special cognizance, etc. He has said, moreover, neither is there anything which does not celebrate his praise, but you understood not their celebration thereof. Which saying conveys the idea that God has bestowed the knowledge of himself and of his unity upon all created beings. According to some, indeed, this celebration of the praises of God consists only in the marvels of the creation and the goodness of the Creator, which, being contemplated by a man of enlightened intellect, give him occasion to admire the unity, power, and wisdom of God. But this opinion only holds good with regard to the reflections that the mind of man may make concerning inanimate things and can by no means be applied to such as are endowed with life. Accordingly, it is related in the tradition of Abu Darda, that the Apostle of God once said, no bird nor fish was ever captured except for having neglected to celebrate the praises of God. Maymun ibn Maran likewise relates that the truthful Abu Bakr, may God be well pleased with him, once saw a crow expanding its broad wings and saying, no game is ever taken, nor does any tree perish, except for having neglected to celebrate the praises of God, and so on to the end of this tradition. Lastly, God himself has informed us how he enabled the ant to give wise counsel to her companions and to warn them to beware of the destruction that was impending over them. He also granted her the privilege of knowing Solomon, peace be upon him, and his armies. This can be seen in the language held by this insect to the other ants, saying, O ants, enter your habitations, lest Solomon and his army tread upon you. God, moreover, enabled her to discern the justice and clemency of Solomon and made her understand that if he had perceived the ants, there would have been no cause to fear that he should exterminate them. This may be perceived from the expression, and perceive it not. Some believe that the personal pronoun, them, in Arabic, which governs the verb, to perceive, relates to the ants, implying that they did not perceive their companion giving them this good advice. However, the former interpretation is better, as the pronoun them properly relates to beings endowed with reason. Elsewhere, God himself informs us that he inspired the lapwing with knowledge that Solomon himself was ignorant of the things he had revealed to her. This can be seen in the words of the lapwing, I have viewed a country which thou hast not viewed. Moreover, God gave her the ability to know the different races of men, distinguish Arabs from barbarians, and identify truthful men from liars. This is evident in the same verse, and I come unto thee from Saba with a certain piece of news. The inhabitants of that country were indeed descended from Saba, the son of Himyar. God also gave her the understanding to differentiate between men and women and kings and vassals. The lapwing continues in the verse, I found a woman to reign over them, namely, to reign over Saba. She was also made aware of how kings accumulate various possessions and treasure, as indicated in the rest of the verse, who is provided with everything, namely, everything customary to offer to princes. Furthermore, God granted her knowledge of different kinds of rubies and pearls, their great value, and their ability to enhance the worth of what they adorned. This is evidenced in the concluding part of the verse, and she hath a magnificent throne, magnificent in the manner of humans. She was made aware of the form of prayer that includes prostrations, its act of propitiation and devotion, and that the people of Saba did not worship God but the sun. This is evident in the words, and I found her and her people to worship the sun, besides God. God also allowed her to recognize the existence of Satan, his inclination to do evil, and that there is only one path in the world that leads to God, the religion acceptable to him. She knew that Satan leads people away from this path and that whoever deviates from it goes astray. This is indicated in the continuation of the verse, and Satan hath prepared their works for them, and hath turned them aside from the way of truth, wherefore they are not rightly directed. He granted her the knowledge that worship is due to God alone and that he is the divine essence. This can be understood from the verses, lest they should worship God, and, there is no God but he. He also gave her insight into the fact that God controls one hidden substance in heaven, which is water, and another on the earth, which is the germ of plants. It is God alone who brings forth both of these, as indirectly conveyed by the lapwing to inspire admiration for the Godhead and to emphasize that God deserves the worship of all his creatures as their creator and sustainer. She also grasped that the hidden things are known to God as well as the visible ones, as indicated in the verse, who brings to light that which is hidden in heaven and earth, and knows whatever they conceal, and whatever they discover. Lastly, God enabled her to understand that he is seated upon a throne, and all the glories of earthly thrones pale in comparison. This is evident from the expression, the Lord of the magnificent throne, where the definite article highlights the inferiority and insignificance of the throne of Balkis, Queen of Saba, which is referred to indefinitely as a magnificent throne. God granted the lapwing knowledge of these profound doctrines that may amaze and confound the minds of humans. Returning to my subject, I declare that when one gains knowledge of facts and deduces conclusions from them, they become proficient in various forms of eloquence. From hearing, which language addresses, they proceed to communicate with the power of imagery, engaging the sense of sight. There is nothing beyond their capabilities. Therefore, I begin my task by praying to God to help me achieve my purpose, guiding my words toward noble objectives that may serve as preparation for the life hereafter. He alone does as he wills, for he is the mighty and valiant, with power and goodness residing in him alone. In the name of God, the most merciful and most compassionate, I, Muhammad ibn Abi Muhammad ibn Zafar, a humble and lowly servant of the Lord, content with his holy will, and may God absolve me of my sins, write as follows. Gratitude to God is the finest garment a person can clothe themselves with, and praise of him is the most assured way to receive blessings in this life and the hereafter. Glory be to God, who grants us patience as a promise of success and friendship as a shelter in times of adversity. Glory be to him who conceals the mysteries of destiny behind an impenetrable veil and holds even the most brilliant minds behind the wall of uncertainty. He leads the obedient along smooth and pleasant paths and propels the unwilling, despite their stumbles and complaints, toward the destination of submission to his divine decrees. He whose name is praised has said, perhaps your soul may dislike something while it is good for you. Blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad, whom he has sent as a witness, a bearer of good news, a warner, a caller to holiness, and by the will of God, a shining light for humanity. May the Most High's blessings be upon him. I say, furthermore, that amidst the challenges of a tumultuous and vagabond life, where manifold tribulations have followed one another, the Most High, whose name is praised, has led me to unite with the brotherhood of one who forgives the faults of the noble-hearted and elicits sighs from the envious, the Lord of Lords and Leader of Leaders, Abu Abd Allah Muhammad ibn Abi, one Kazim ibn Ali, of the house of Ali and the tribe of Quraysh. May God bless him, crown his God-prompted endeavors with success, and be his guardian and surety for all time. When he entered the world, he was called to occupy lofty positions but was also forewarned of the pitfalls that abound in them. Hence, his endeavors are directed towards the enduring, not the ephemeral. He accumulates wealth to distribute, not to amass for himself. He bestows his charity for the love of God, not to earn the praise of people, and he extends kindness as a brother to promote justice and piety, not to gain affection through flattery. He adorns his leadership with a spirit suitable for every twist of fate. He doesn't lend an ear to slanderers, nor does he allow his wealth to rust. His patience is such that wrath cannot rear its head beside it, and his governance is so steadfast that those under his guidance have no reason to fear calamity. Therefore, I reiterate my gratitude to God, who has granted me this brotherly kindness, a robust defense, a reliable sanctuary, plentiful pasture, and living springs of water. Under his protection, we have all that we could ever wish, love, select, and yearn for. He shields us from anything that might displease us, and if something seems appealing, he promptly allows us to assess it through evidence. We rely on him for support, as one would rely on a father. We have tested his loyalty in times of both prosperity and adversity, and during both, we have experienced his generous protection. Moreover, I solemnly swear that if gratitude were not both a sacred duty and a social obligation, I would have, in order to please him, rolled up the document that I previously unrolled when the Almighty spared me from the sorrow of his passing and the prospect of living without him. I would have concealed what I had previously written to demonstrate the readiness of gratitude for his kindness and the enduring nature of his praise in the mouths of his loyal supporters. May Providence continue to extend its support to him, keep calamity at bay, elevate the highest ranks of power through him, and thwart the cunning schemes of his adversaries. Amen. Amen. When the abundant seeds of gifts resulted in a bountiful harvest of affection, and gratitude reached its pinnacle, I endeavored to present to him the finest and most excellent gift that would please him and be fitting for his merit. I couldn't find anything more suitable than knowledge, which he passionately admires, wisdom, which he has always held dear, and literature, which he diligently pursues, both by nature and education, holding it in high regard in both his mind and heart. I presented him with Asdlib al-Ghaiyah, which delves into 11 interpretations for a comprehensive understanding of the divine saying, O true believers, when you prepare yourselves to pray, wash your faces and your hands unto the elbows, and rub your hands and your feet unto the ankles. Additionally, I included El-Mosam, a guide to the perfect apprehension of the Munna and the Ishrdf, where I compiled all the questions from these two renowned works and provided the finest answers. I continued with Durer el-Ghor, where I integrated the pearls of the Anbd Nohabad, Lebnd, notices of remarkable children, selecting those that were particularly elusive and shone with philosophical insight or literary elegance. Fourthly, I now present this work in which I aim to narrate tales that have previously been closely guarded by the most renowned monarchs. These tales will be presented as I have heard them, enriched by my language and heightened by my imagination to enhance their variety. I intend to treat the subjects in a way that does not violate any laws or offend anyone's sensibilities. My goal is for the characters who have been introduced as new moons to shine as full moons, and for those who have been presented as sapling shoots to grow into majestic palm trees laden with fruit. I want to infuse their countenances with the spirit of their noble souls, dress them in regal attire, adorn their heads with the crown of their lofty thoughts, and place the sword of their heroic deeds across their shoulders. I will commence each book with several verses from the unchanging revelation and with some traditions of the chosen prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Following this, I will provide a few philosophical sentences on the same theme, in both prose and poetry, the companions and consorts of literature. Lastly, I will unveil a garden for the pleasure of the heart and ears, as well as an arena for the cultivation of the mind and character. I have titled this book, Solwan al-Muda fi Adwan al-Adba, Resources of a Prince Exposed to the Hostility of His Subjects. The term, Solwan, is the plural form of Solwana, which is the name of a shell. The Arabs believe that if a little water is poured into it and given to someone in love to drink, they will immediately recover. The Rajis has said, even if I were to drink from the Solwan, I would not find peace. I cannot live without you, even if I were to amass wealth. The resources I speak of are 5 in number. Firstly, trust in God. Secondly, fortitude. Thirdly, patience. Fourthly, contentment. Fifthly, self-denial. I look to God to grant me His aid for the attainment of my purpose and to prosper my work for the benefit of those who worship Him, for He alone can will and execute. He is the High and Mighty One, where power and goodness dwell. Sulwan. Chapter 1. Trust in God. God, whose name is blessed, has said, perhaps your soul may dislike something, even though it is good for you. And again, yet perhaps you dislike a thing which is better for you, and perhaps you love a thing which is worse for you. But God knows, and you know not. Through these words, God aims to guide those with understanding from pursuing their own inclinations and indicates his approval for those who place their faith in him. The wise person entrusts their judgment to the one who knows the true path to salvation. The exhortation to implicit trust contained in the 2 verses quoted above will be clearly understood when we consider how frequently that which is repugnant to our inclinations serves to bring about that which we desire, and likewise the converse. It is the part of the clear-sighted not to place confidence in that which is evil because of the pleasure it offers, nor to despair of that which is good because of the evil which, at first sight, we discern in it. He must entrust the decision to God and not attempt to make it himself. Such is the boundless trust that befits one who prays to God for the removal of some calamity or implores his clemency during adverse fortune. 2. Pharaoh and his kinsmen. Behold God's dealings with a believer, of the blood royal of Egypt, who put his whole trust in him. The narrative is thus handed down to us. This believer was a kinsman of Pharaoh, and one of his most familiar friends. In religion, he was a follower of Moses, which becoming known to the viziers and the courtiers, they proceeded to give information to the king, who, moved by the love he bore his kinsman, refused to hearken to their words. However, when the miracles which God wrought by the hand of Moses were seen even in the chief city of his kingdom, Pharaoh called a council of all his viziers and courtiers, among whom was this believer, and having asked their advice, they all agreed that a sentence of banishment should be passed upon Moses. But after the magicians had been summoned in order to oppose their miracles to his, it occurred to the king to rid himself of the prophet by putting him to death, of which our Lord, whose name be glorified, informs us in the following words. They answered, Put off him and his brother with fair promises for some time, and in the meantime send unto the cities and assemble the inhabitants, that they may bring unto thee every expert magician. And Pharaoh said, Let me alone, that I may kill Moses, and let him call upon his Lord. Verily I fear lest he change your religion or cause violence to appear on the earth. Seeing that such was the king's pleasure, none of his ministers ventured to dissuade him, so great was the fear in which he was held. But the believer, being grieved at the king's intention to lay hands upon Moses, lost patience, and no longer able to conceal his secret within his own bosom, exclaimed, As the Lord has revealed unto us, will ye put a man to death because he saith, God is my Lord, seeing he has come unto you with evident signs from your Lord? He then interceded repeatedly on his behalf, admonishing the king to use caution and to abstain from his purpose. He said, As the Lord has written. If he is a liar, on him will the punishment of his falsehood light, but if he speaks the truth, some of those judgments with which he threatens you will fall upon you. When Pharaoh heard these words, he was very wrathful. He cast his kinsmen into prison and, having laid the matter before his viziers and courtiers, they counseled to put him to torture and afterward to death, as a check to those who might be inclined to cherish the same opinions. Pharaoh, however, would not consent to this because the believer was near of kin to him. He commanded his viziers to go to him, seeking to persuade and admonish him to return to the obedience he owed to the king, and menacing him with the punishment he would incur if he persisted in his beliefs. The believer, on the other hand, sought to win them over to the true faith, reminding them of the miracles their own eyes had beheld and warning them not to forfeit the blessings God had bestowed upon them or incur his displeasure. As revealed to us in the following words, O my people, verily I fear for you an overthrow like that of the Azab people. A condition like that of the people of Noah, and the tribes of Ad and Thamud, and of those who lived after them. O my people, verily I fear for you the day whereon men shall call unto one another. The day whereon you shall be turned back from the tribunal, and driven to hell, then you shall have none to protect you against God. And he whom God shall cause to err shall have no director. Joseph came unto you before Moses, with evident signs, but you ceased not to doubt the religion which he preached unto you until, when he died, you said, God will by no means send another apostle after him. Thus does God cause him to err who is a transgressor and a skeptic. O my people, as for me, I invite you to salvation, but you invite me to hellfire. You invite me to deny God and to associate with him that whereof I have no knowledge, but I invite you to the Most Mighty, the forgiver of sins. There is no doubt but that the false gods to which you invite me deserve not to be invoked either in this world or in the next, and that we must return unto God, and that the transgressors shall be the inhabitants of hell fire. And ye shall then remember what I now say unto you, and I commit my affair unto God, for God regardeth his servants. The viziers and courtiers, returning to Pharaoh, related to him how the believer persisted in his offense and disobedience, and how their admonitions had produced no other effect than to make him adhere the more obstinately to his own opinion. These tidings sorely grieved the king, so that he desired to be left alone and remained absorbed in reflection on this subject, until one of his daughters came to him and besought him to tell her what had so disturbed him. He related to her all that had happened, and the maiden replied thus: "If it rested with me to rescue you from this perplexity, I would of a surety counsel you to refrain from injuring your most trusty friends and kindred. Doubtless, your kinsman has no wish other than your own. But seeing how boldly Moses dares to resist the sovereign beneath whose scepter he dwells, he perceives that it is impossible to put him to death openly, and therefore has made a pretense of professing the doctrine which thus offends you, for the sole purpose of deceiving Moses. All that you have seen and heard is but a fraud devised against Moses, and if he abstained from disclosing it to your viziers when they went to seek him, he did so because he knew them to be utterers of calumny, full of envy and malignity, who would never have seconded his counsel nor aided in the execution of his purpose." When Pharaoh heard his daughter's words, he was glad, and God put it into his heart to believe them. It is said to have been Asia, the wife of Pharaoh, who had bidden the maiden to give such counsel to her father. Pharaoh then summoned his kinsman to his presence, showed him great honor, excused himself for his treatment of him, and said, "I now know your design, and the purpose of your actions. Speak, therefore, as you will, act as it may please you, for I mistrust you no longer." And God, whose name be lauded, speaks thus, wherefore God delivered him from the evils which they had devised. And a grievous punishment encompassed the people of Pharaoh, which signifies that God returned upon their own heads the punishment which they were minded to inflict upon the believer. Be it here observed, that temporal punishment has nothing in common with eternal punishment, saving the name. The expression quoted above is similar to this one. But the contrivance of evil shall only encompass the authors thereof. Meanwhile, be it known to you, O reader, and may God show you mercy as well as unto me, that the true meaning of the word, tafwid, trust in others, is implicit confidence in the wisdom of the All-Wise. The Lord has clearly set it forth to his elect in the following words. Say, nothing shall befall us but what God has decreed for us, he is our patron, and on God, let the faithful trust. The foundation of boundless faith and the reason that should lead us to it is the certain knowledge that nothing, whether of good or evil, can come to pass but what he wills. That man can never repose implicit trust in God who does not hold this dogma steadfastly and with lively faith. 3. Tradition concerning Muhammad. Tradition concerning Muhammad. This was a truth that the Prophet, upon whom be the blessings of God, earnestly strove to set forth clearly and render conspicuous when he spoke to Abd Allah ibn Masud. Say within yourself, that which is foreordained will befall you, and that which is not foreordained will not befall you. Know, moreover, that if all created beings were to unite in the attempt to obtain for you a blessing that God had not inscribed in the book of fate, they would be unable to effect it, and were they to endeavor to afflict you with some evil that God had not decreed, neither would they have the power to bring it to pass. In this tradition, the expression, say within yourself, contains a command to trust in God, and the remainder shows the reason why people of understanding should commit themselves entirely into his hands. It is likewise related in the Musnad of Muslim, that on one occasion the Prophet, conversing with Abu Huraira, said unto him, "When any unpleasant event befalls you, do not say, if I had but acted thus and thus, say, rather, such is God's decree, may his will be done, for the if opens the breach to Satan, and assuredly does not lead either to trust in God or resignation to his will." Every one may perceive that the Prophet forbade the expression, if, as it rejects implicit trust in God and leads to opposition to his decrees, and the desire of resistance to his will. Muslim, in the book entitled Sahih, the Genuine, relates to us, on the authority of Bara ibn Azib, another of the Prophet's sayings, which is as follows. When you go to bed, perform the same ablutions as you do before your prayers, then lie down on your right side and say, O my God, unto you do I commit my soul, unto you do I look up with longing and fear, with yourself alone can I find refuge from you. I believe in the book of your revelation and in your apostle whom you have sent, and so on to the end of the tradition. 4. Philosophical maxims, both in prose and verse, concerning trust in God. If the sick person resists their physician, they themselves must bear the penalty. He alone is shrewd and subtle who commits themselves into the hands of the Almighty. For it is absurd to contend against destiny, and human diligence is one of the forces that aids the resistless course of fate. When the issue is uncertain, you must commit yourself into the hands of him who governs destiny. Amongst the arguments which prove man to be a passive being, subjected to rule and governance, as this, that in many cases his judgment is obscured, and he loses sight both of the right path and of the goal which he desires to attain. This being the case, if he follows his own guidance, he hastens to his ruin; if he trusts his own cunning, it leads him to certain destruction; if he but moves, he perishes. It is said that, on one occasion, when his mind was torn by various conflicting opinions, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf composed the following verse: "Suffer this daughter of heaven to go forth and run the way of fate, and corrupt her not by the counsels of thy foolishness." I myself have sung on the same subject: O thou, who in moments of perplexity, wouldst trust to thine own counsel, and provide for thyself. If the case be doubtful, commit it to him who sees in it that which thou canst not see. Thus shalt thou find thyself guarded by love which preserves thee from ruin, and by goodness which shortens the path before thee to the end which it has foreordained. Seeing thou art ignorant of the end, and hast neither liberty nor power to follow thine own pleasure. Why dost thou fret thyself? Of what art thou glad? What dost thou fear or desire? Once again, I have expressed. Many are those who find joy only to meet ruin, as they embrace advice that leads to their own destruction. How often do individuals yearn for power, only to discover that its attainment brings misery both in this world and the next? The knowledge of the future remains veiled and elusive, no matter how strenuously we attempt to unveil it. Those who try to oppose destiny through cunning schemes have embarked on a treacherous and narrow path. Instead, be like one who openly believes in what is certain, and places the uncertain in the crucible of life. Hold firmly to trust in God as the most profound expression of the Unitarian faith of Islam, and remember that resisting what has been ordained is akin to the sin of polytheism. 5. Fair garden and excellent arena. Dialogue between the Caliph Wade ibn Yazid and a poor cottager. Walid ibn Yazid ibn Abd al-Malik, being informed that his paternal uncle, Yazid ibn Walid ibn Abd al-Malik, went about alienating the minds of the people from him, levying troops in Yemen to shake the foundations of his throne, and even attempting his life, fled from the society of his most intimate friends. He was seen by none of his customary associates. One evening, when this fit of melancholy was upon him, he called one of his servants and said to him, "Disguise yourself, go forth from the palace, and take up your post in one of the streets. Carefully note the passers-by. When you see a man of mature years, with a squalid appearance, poorly clad, walking slowly and in silence as if absorbed in thought, come forward and greet him. Whisper in his ear, 'The commander of the faithful desires to see you. If he readily complies, bring him to me. But if he seeks to excuse himself, hesitates, or makes difficulties, let him go and seek another until you find such a one as I have described.'" The servant went forth and returned to the Caliph, bringing exactly the man needed. Upon entering the room where Walid was seated, the man greeted him in the customary manner reserved for the commander of the faithful. He remained standing until the Caliph invited him to approach and be seated. Walid spoke to him with great condescension, dispelling the initial fear the man had and calming his nerves. The Caliph then asked him if he enjoyed conversing with a Caliph, to which he replied, "Most certainly I do, O commander of the faithful." Walid continued, "Since you find delight in such conversation, please tell me, what do you think it involves, and what does it consist of?" The man replied, "It involves speaking to the prince when he is silent, being silent when he speaks, and discussing appropriate and non-trivial topics." "You have answered well," said the Caliph, "and we are satisfied with the trial we have made of you. Now, therefore, speak, and we will be silent and listen." "O commander of the faithful," continued the stranger, "there are two kinds of conversation, and no third can be added. The first involves relaying useful knowledge, while the second relates to discussing matters that aid in achieving a particular objective. In the capital of the commander of the faithful, I have heard no stories of any kind. Therefore, instead of a tale, I will present a similitude, and rather than pointing out the path to the commander of the faithful, I will approach it and stand at its edge." "It is well said," replied Walid, "we will, therefore, ourselves point out the path and guide you to follow it. We are aware that one of our subjects has risen against our authority, pursuing his purpose to our great injury. Have you heard anything about this matter?" "Yes," replied the stranger, and Walid continued, "So, please share what you know about it, presenting it in the manner you think best." 6. Adventure of the Umayyad Caliph, Abd al-Malik. "O commander of the faithful," began the stranger, "I have heard a story about the Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan. He levied troops against Abdallah ibn Zubair and advanced with his army towards Mecca, may God defend it. He wanted to take Amr ibn Said ibn Oz with him, a man who was viewed with suspicion, as he was thought to have sinister intentions and aspirations for the caliphate. Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan was well aware of this but had spared his life, given his clemency and their family ties. However, when the caliph had traveled several days on the campaign, Amr ibn Said requested permission to return to Damascus, claiming he was ill. Abd al-Malik granted his request. As soon as Amr entered the capital, he ascended a pulpit and addressed the people, speaking against the caliph and urging them to depose him from the throne. The people supported his proposal, declared Amr as caliph, and pledged their allegiance to him. After taking control of Damascus, he fortified the walls, prepared the surrounding areas for defense, strengthened the borders, and distributed gifts. Abd al-Malik received news of these events while he was still en route against Ibn Zubair, and he also learned that the governor of Emesa had renounced his loyalty, with people on the borders on the brink of rebellion. Having received this information, the caliph entered the tent within which his viziers were assembled. He pointed with a wand, which he held, to the right and left, as he informed them of the situation. He said, "Here is Damascus, the capital of our empire, already occupied by Amr ibn Said. Abd Allah ibn Zubair has made himself master of Hejaz, Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, and Khorasan. Noman ibn Basir, the emir of Emesa, Zafar ibn Harith, the emir of Kinisrin, and Nile ibn Qais, the emir of Philistin, have all renounced their allegiance to me and recognized Ibn Zubair as the caliph. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of the border country are vacillating, and the Egyptians are arming themselves to avenge the massacres of Marj Rahit." Upon hearing these words, the viziers lost their composure. Believing that resistance was futile and seeing no way of escape, they hung their heads in silence. The caliph asked, "What's troubling all of you that you are silent? Hurry, give me your advice, for I am in great need of it now." The wisest among them responded, "What counsel can we offer in this dire situation? I wish I were a chameleon, living in a tree trunk in Tahama, until these troubles have passed." Muhammad ibn Ẓafar states that this chameleon is a small reptile, less than a span long, with 4 feet and a head resembling that of a calf. At sunrise, it climbs onto a branch, clod of earth, or stone, fixing its eyes on the sun. It stares at the sun without ever moving its eyes away until the sun reaches its zenith. When the sun's rays fall directly on the chameleon's head, it can no longer look at the sun. At this point, the chameleon writhes, struggles, and strikes the roof of its mouth with its tongue, resembling a man urging on a donkey. This behavior continues until the sun starts to descend. The chameleon then turns to the other side, fixing its eyes on the sun again until it disappears below the horizon. Once it can no longer see the sun, the chameleon goes out to search for food during the night. It repeats this same routine the following day. The vizier wished he could be like this chameleon to avoid the impending civil wars. Perceiving from this answer that he could hope for no assistance from his viziers, Abd al-Malik commanded them to remain where they were and went away. He immediately mounted his horse alone, giving orders that a squadron of the bravest and most experienced of his horsemen should arm themselves, mount, and follow him closely enough to observe any sign he might make. In this manner, he left the camp, with the escort following him as directed. Abd al-Malik rode on until he encountered an infirm old man dressed in humble attire who was busy gathering sumac. After greeting him and engaging in conversation about various trivial matters, the caliph eventually asked him if he knew anything about the army's whereabouts. "They are encamped in such a place," replied the old man. "That much I know." Abd al-Malik continued, "Have you heard what people are saying about the expedition?" The old man retorted, "What does it matter to you?" The caliph replied, "I have a desire to join the army, enlist in it, and seek my fortune." "Is it possible?" the old man exclaimed. "With your cleanliness and rich attire, and your high rank, it seems. Furthermore, why do you seek my advice on a decision you've already made?" Abd al-Malik responded, "Indeed, I have great need of your advice." The old man then said, "Well, in that case, you must abandon this plan, to which you seem very attached. The prince, whose service you intend to enter, has reached a point where his power is dwindling, his followers are dispersing, and his affairs are descending into chaos. A faltering monarch is akin to a tumultuous sea, it's best viewed from afar." "Old man," replied the caliph, "there is no prudence powerful enough to restrain me once a desire has taken hold of my soul. I feel an irresistible attraction to follow the fortunes of this prince, and I am determined to do so. Meanwhile, you would do me a favor if you could advise me on the steps the caliph should take in the current crisis of his fortunes. I could convey your counsel to him, which might serve as a recommendation and perhaps provide me a means to win his favor." The old man responded, "There are calamities in which the wisdom and power of God close every possible escape against human intellect. However, the misfortune that has befallen the caliph does not appear to be one that defies human wisdom from applying a remedy or human counsel from achieving a prosperous outcome. Moreover, since you have asked me, I would hate to disappoint your expectations. So, I will provide you with an answer as you desire, although I do not have complete confidence in my own judgment, as the situation is highly perilous, and the remedy to be applied is of equal importance. Speak, and may God requite you, exclaimed Abd al-Malik, even as I trust that he will aid you and guide me to safety through your counsel. The old man continued, the caliph has gone forth to make war against his enemy. However, it has become evident that this undertaking is contrary to the will of God. The proof of God's disfavor toward the war against Ibn Zubayr is that he has hindered the caliph by inciting a rebellion in the heart of his empire. Amr ibn Said has boldly claimed his seat, seduced his people, seized his treasure, and even taken possession of the throne of the caliphs. Therefore, I advise you to closely observe the caliph's situation and wait to see his course of action. If you witness him persist in his intention to attack Ibn Zubayr, be certain that he will not succeed. In that case, flee from him, for his obstinate persistence, despite God's clear signs directing him to desist, will lead to his inevitable failure. However, if you see him retreat and abandon the enterprise, then have hope that he may escape unscathed. Such an act would indicate his repentance and desire for rectification. God, whose name be praised, is known to forgive the sins of those who seek his forgiveness and to have mercy on those who return to him. But is it not the same, interrupted Abd al-Malik, whether the caliph returns to Damascus or continues his march against Ibn Zubayr? Isn't the will of God equally evident through the alienation of his subjects in Damascus, and their pledging allegiance to another? Whether he goes forward against Ibn Zubayr or turns back against Amr ibn Said, both have fortified themselves with the power of a mighty kingdom and its subjects. The old man responded, you do not perceive the significant difference between these two scenarios, which I shall now explain. Abd al-Malik, by advancing against Ibn Zubayr, appears as an unjust aggressor because Ibn Zubayr never swore allegiance to him and hasn't attacked any territory under his rule. However, by advancing against Amr ibn Said, he is seen as the aggrieved party. Amr has violated his oath of allegiance, betrayed the trust placed in him by the caliph, incited rebellion and treason among the people, and attacked a kingdom that did not belong to him or his forefathers but to Abd al-Malik and his ancestors. Therefore, Amr ibn Said is a usurper and an illegitimate holder of sovereign power. It is said that, he who has grown fat through plunder shall waste away, he who rules through treachery shall be ousted, the army of the unrighteous shall be defeated, and the nose of tyranny shall be broken. I will now relate to you a parable that can act as a soothing balm for your soul, dispelling your doubts. This parable will also incorporate various philosophical epigrams, designed to sharpen your intellect, stimulate your mind, and reveal the face of truth. 7. The Two Foxes. There is a story of a fox named Zalim, which means, the wicked. He had a comfortable and convenient den, as no better one could be found. However, one day, when he returned from his hunt for food, he discovered that a snake had taken up residence in his hole. Zalim decided to wait for the serpent to leave, but his patience was in vain. He eventually realized that the noxious snake had claimed the hole as its own dwelling. Snakes do not have their own lairs and often enter the homes of other animals, driving them away. Thus, the Rajis, seeking to illustrate the injustice of a wicked man, writes, "Thou art like the viper that does not burrow but seeks out some careless one to establish itself in his den." Hence comes the proverb, "Such a one is more wicked than a serpent, and the serpent's wickedness is this." Since the snake had occupied his hole, and unable to share it with the snake, the fox went in search of another shelter. He wandered about until he came across a hole that looked very inviting. This hole was excavated in firm soil, located in the midst of a fertile area with abundant trees and numerous rivulets. Struck with admiration, Zalim inquired about the owner of this hole and was told that it belonged to a fox named Mufawwad, meaning, trusting in God. Mufawwad had inherited it from his father. Zalim then called out to Mufawwad, who came forth to meet him, received him with great courtesy, and invited him into his hole. Mufawwad asked Zalim what had brought him there, and Zalim proceeded to relate his recent experiences, lamenting the misfortune he had encountered. Touched by his plight, Mufawwad addressed him. "I believe that you should not refrain from confronting your enemy, but should make every effort to dislodge him and put an end to him." This sentiment is echoed in the following sayings. Those who suspect their enemies are already on the path to victory, much like those who lead armies against them. Cunning often prevails over a powerful tribe. Furthermore, there's a proverb that states, it's better to die in the fire than to live in dishonor. But if you decide to use force against your enemy, don't engage unless you know he is weaker than you. If you choose to employ deception, never consider him too formidable, no matter his strength. Therefore, my advice is for you to return with me to your previous abode, which you were unjustly deprived of. Let me inspect it closely. Perhaps I can devise a stratagem to help you reclaim it. It's been said that the best measures are based on thoughtful consideration. It is also said that 3 factors can lead to the ruin of any undertaking. First, if the plan is shared with many people, it becomes widely known and fails. Secondly, if those privy to the plan are rivals or envious of one another, it introduces emotions of love and hatred, leading to the plan's destruction. Lastly, if the direction of the project is entrusted to someone who hasn't been involved from the beginning, instead of the one who initiated it personally, the original leader will become jealous and envious of the newcomer, causing the plan to miss its target. Ultimately, if someone shapes an enterprise based on hearsay, they build on possibilities, but if they base it on first-hand observation, they build on certainties. The 2 foxes then proceeded to Zalim's hole, where Mufawwad thoroughly inspected it and gathered the necessary information. Turning to Zalim, he said, "I've seen enough to devise a stratagem and identify the enemy's vulnerable point." Zalim inquired, "What do you think we should do then?" To which his friend responded, "Advice formed at first glance is usually the least valuable. It is often said that counsel is the mirror of one's intellect. If you want to gauge someone's capabilities, seek their counsel. The best counsel is the one grounded in careful thought and adopted after deliberate consideration. If counsel is indeed the sword of wisdom, and the sharpest sword is one that has been meticulously honed and finely polished, then surely the counsel that has been discussed most thoroughly and weighed for the longest time will surpass all others. It has also been said that counsel given without the diligent labor of an entire night's thought is ineffective. Therefore, come with me, and stay the night at my dwelling. During this time, I will engage in deep reflection and consider all the stratagems at my disposal." They did as Mufawwad had suggested. While Mufawwad pondered various strategies, Zalim took the opportunity to examine Mufawwad's dwelling meticulously. It seemed spacious, strategically situated, well defended, and replete with comforts and conveniences. Zalim found himself increasingly drawn to the idea of acquiring this dwelling, developing a strong desire to make it his own, and began devising his own scheme to achieve this goal while ousting Mufawwad. It is often said that a wicked person is akin to fire. If you provide fuel, it will blaze up. They are also akin to wine, ensnaring those who love them and enslaving those who follow them. You can't conquer inherent malevolence with kindness. A wise individual places testing before forming close bonds, examination before making choices, and trust before love. The next day, Mufawwad spoke to Zalim, saying, "I've observed that your current dwelling is a bit far from the trees and cultivated fields. I suggest that you give it up, take heart, and I'll assist you in digging a new hole in this fertile and pleasant neighborhood." Zalim replied, "That's impossible. My nature is such that leaving my birthplace would cause me to wither away from grief. I might find a new abode, but it wouldn't bring me peace." It is often noted that a well-conditioned mind exhibits 7 qualities: filial piety, love for one's kin, affection for one's homeland, the desire to live contentedly in one's own abode, self-reproach for squandering one's youth in vain, a tendency to wear outmoded clothing, and the ability to endure the trials and infirmities of old age. It is also said that an exile exists in a state akin to living death. The shadow remains, but the essence of the person has departed. To these words of Zalim, Mufawwad probably responded as follows: "The one offering counsel must be familiar with the circumstances of the one seeking advice, or else the counsel might lead to greater harm. It's akin to a physician prescribing the right remedy for a specific ailment without knowledge of the patient's age, constitution, dietary habits, and medications taken. The immediate causes of the illness, the season, and the local environment should be considered as well. Moreover, when a physician believes they've found the appropriate remedy, they must adjust its strength to the severity of the disease. It is not impossible that if your nature reflects your name, the wicked, you might be undergoing the consequences of some wrongdoing or oppression inflicted on others. If that is the case, your attempts to escape your current distress might be as fruitless as a wild animal entangled in a net, struggling desperately, only to become more ensnared or even bring about its own demise, which the captor hadn't intended. However, even if you're not suffering the consequences of wrongdoing, your situation remains uncertain. In such cases, there's no better course of action than to entrust yourself to the one who alone knows and ordains these matters, demonstrating his wisdom by bringing them to fruition. And now I will share with you a fable. In this fable, you can both appreciate the elegance of language and gather the wisdom of mature philosophy. Indeed, fables, which are easily understood, captivate our minds like a magnet. Allegories have the power to touch us deeply, and their lessons often come to mind more readily than the maxims themselves. It's akin to how the eye is often drawn more easily to a painting than to the original object. For a similar reason, we are more inclined to listen to the language attributed to animals in fables than to the quoted sayings of even the most brilliant individuals. Fables. 8. The Peacock and the Cock. It is related, whether it be true or false, that a man well versed in the maladies of fowls and their remedies had two peafowls, a cock and a hen. The cock was named Ẓibrij, which means the many-colored. Their master, who greatly cherished them and often caressed them, noticed one day, upon examining Ẓibrij's plumage, that its colors were fading, a sure sign of impending illness. He knew that this illness could be prevented and cured by plucking the principal feathers from Ẓibrij's wings, separating him from the company of the hen, reducing his food intake, and adding a bitter drug to everything he ate or drank. These measures were put into action, and Ẓibrij became overwhelmed with anger and despair. It was said that impatience in the face of our troubles blinds us to the remaining blessings. Indeed, impatience in the midst of calamity is itself a third misfortune. It is a third misfortune because the impatient person not only loses the merit of their tribulation in the eyes of God but also exacerbates their own suffering through their struggles. Thus, they become victims of three afflictions simultaneously. Ẓibrij, in his isolation, observed a cock named Hinzib, who belonged to the same master and was one of the most beautiful of his kind, both in form and plumage, crowing and frolicking. This sight further deepened Ẓibrij's discontent. Is it any wonder that God, who performs countless miracles, might have granted intellect and wisdom to these two animals, just as he did to the hoopoe of Solomon, peace be upon him? Therefore, it is not impossible that Ẓibrij may have spoken to Hinzib, saying, "You, who still enjoy your freedom, do you have the heart to empathize with an unfortunate soul separated from his companion, deprived of his flight, and subjected to poisoned food daily? If you have pity for his plight and are willing to listen to his grievances, you might offer him comfort and devise a means of escape for him." "And what could prevent me from helping?" responded Hinzib. "Do I not know that among all the deeds that emanate from a generous spirit, showing kindness to the afflicted is what pleases God the most? It is often said that we are all bound by mutual insurance against the misfortunes that may befall any one among us. Among those who are at ease, the most fortunate will be the one who treats another's calamity as if it were his own, first by alleviating the suffering and later by advising them on how to prevent a recurrence of the misfortune, so the afflicted person should always be grateful and avoid falling into adversity again. It is said that the value of goodness is seldom appreciated when it is obtained and possessed but rather once it is lost and we yearn for it in vain. How can we truly be thankful for it until we understand its true worth? It is often said that there are 4 cases in which a person may not be grateful for benefits: when they already possess them, when these benefits help them gain independence from their benefactor, when they are excessively praised for these benefits, or when they know they can't repay them adequately. Hinzib continued, "Firstly, it is our duty to acknowledge the superiority of humans, who are elevated by their gift of intellect and wisdom, and to recognize their right to exercise authority and dominion over us. It is only just that they may sometimes do things displeasing to us for our own good, or even without any fault on our part, for they know what they are doing." Ẓibrij agreed, "What you say is true." Hinzib went on, "Have you committed any wrongs?" To which Ẓibrij responded, "No, never." Hinzib then concluded, "If you truly acknowledge your master's authority, you should submit to him and give up any thoughts of resistance. It is said that if the slave be angry at his lord's commands, he thereby denies his authority, and makes an effort to escape from the station in which he is placed, in the same manner that to be indignant at the sentence of a judge is to accuse him either of tyranny or of ignorance. He is not sincere in his allegiance who does not willingly submit to an act of justice on the part of his superior, which is painful to himself. Listen," continued Hinzib, "to a tale which may, perhaps, relieve your mind and lead you to hope and to contentment." 9. The 2 Viziers. It is related that a certain king had 2 viziers, both of them honest and faithful, one of whom, a devout man, was used to exercise himself in works of benevolence, in the practices of piety, and in abstinence from many of the unbridled desires of the flesh. These 2 viziers were scarcely ever agreed, so that the king, being much annoyed by their differences, saw himself compelled to dismiss one of them, and in order to determine which it should be, he devised the following expedient. Having found a house in which was a hiding place that could not be detected, he commanded one of his most trusty servants to conceal himself in it, and having informed him that he was about to imprison the 2 viziers, bade him give good heed to all their words and actions. He then had the 2 viziers suddenly seized and conducted to that house, of which he caused the door to be walled up, leaving only a little window through which food and drink could be supplied to the prisoners. The first day passed without either of them having uttered a syllable to the other. But, in the evening, the least devout of the 2 asked his companion, "How do you feel?" And the devout one replied, "I have confidence in destiny and commit myself into the hands of him who foreordains all things, whose holy name be praised. I, on the contrary," resumed the first speaker, "feel my blood boil within me and cannot rest in peace. For what cause, think you, has this misfortune befallen us?" "I have reviewed the whole of my conduct," answered the devout vizier, "and I cannot see that I have fallen into any error as regards the king that could have displeased him. As regards the army and the people, I have committed 2 kinds of injustice, that is, I have always defended the people against the soldiers, and I have also made every exertion to satisfy the latter. 25 Lastly, I find my sins against God to be innumerable, although I have never failed to examine my conscience daily, both morning and night, and then to repent me of my faults, implore the forgiveness of God, and make every effort in my power to expiate them. It appears to me, therefore, that I am now enduring the punishment of my sins against the Lord my God. And I, on the other hand," replied his companion, "believe that I have been calumniated by such a one from envy of my influence with the king. What think you?" "I think," replied the devout vizier, "that both you and I ought to strive after resignation to God's ordinances, and confidence in his good pleasure, for this our calamity is a mystery, which if our intellect seeks to penetrate, it will only grope in darkness, and will never succeed in doing so." "Nonsense," responded the other. "Many better plans than that have occurred to me, but the only one which suits me is to write to the king, offering to give up to him all my substance, on condition that I am set at liberty so that I may remain undisturbed in my own house to worship the Lord my God." "That would be a very undesirable expedient," replied the devout vizier, "for it would give rise to many suspicions, it would open the path of injustice before the king, and would be to despair of the grace of God." They spoke no more that night, and on the morrow, a single loaf was brought to them. "Eat," said the devout vizier to his companion. "Not I," replied he, "I am afraid of being poisoned." "And I," said the other, "will take my share and commit myself to God." Then taking 1/2 of the loaf and beginning to eat, what should he find in it but a magnificent ruby? The second night passed, and at daybreak, a loaf was again brought to them, of which the devout vizier took 1/2 and found another gem in it, and on the third day, the same thing happened. The king then released them from prison, and his servant informed him of all that had passed, upon which he sent for the viziers and questioned them closely as to their words and actions in the prison. They both told him the truth, and the devout one, producing the gems, added, "I found these in my food, but it is not right that I should appropriate another's share." "By my faith," replied the prince, "it is God who has deprived him of them and has provided them for you as a reward for your trust in him. These gems alone were in the loaves, and I merely wished to ascertain, by experiment, what each of you would do when his interests were at stake. I have thus discovered that your companion is possessed by devils and infested with evil thoughts concerning his Maker, against whom he rebels, while he suspects me of a design to tyrannize over him, despoil him of his substance, and poison him. You, on the other hand, speedily resigned yourself, without striving to discover what steps could be taken in a case of which you neither knew the cause nor the true circumstances. Thus, you surrendered yourself into the hands of God, and in all your conjectures never sought to blame anyone but yourself. I perceive that the Lord has chosen you to be our support and has pointed you out as the only one worthy to fill our place and to enjoy our favor. Give thanks to him, who has been your guide, trust him more and more in the season of calamity, and commit yourself into his hands in the doubtful events of life." Thus, the king took him to be his only vizier and sent away the other in a dismal plight. 10. Conclusion of the fable of the peacock and the cock. Zibrij, having heard this tale, submitted himself implicitly to his master, whose will he had resisted, being displeased with his measures, and thus, his irritation being appeased, and his malady giving way before the efficacy of the remedies applied, his master restored to him the abundance, the pleasures, and the companionship he had formerly enjoyed. 11. Conclusion of the fable of the 2 foxes. Perceiving Zalim's great desire to return to his own country, Mufawwad thus addressed him. "It is my advice that we should both go this very day and collect wood, which we will make into 2 faggots. When it is night, I will run to one of the tents in this neighborhood to fetch a lighted brand, and with it and the wood, we will proceed to your hole, into the mouth of which we will thrust the 2 faggots and set fire to them. Then, if the serpent endeavors to come out, it will be so scorched by the flames that it will certainly die." Ẓalim replied, "Excellent, that will do perfectly." They then set to work, gathering as much wood as they could carry. When the people in the tents lit their fires at night, Mufawwad went to steal a burning brand. Meanwhile, Ẓalim seized one of the faggots and carried it to a hidden spot. He then dragged the other faggot to Mufawwad's dwelling, entered it, and wedged the faggot in the entrance to the den. Ẓalim thought that when Mufawwad returned, he would be unable to enter. The hole was very strong, and the entrance was securely closed with the faggot. If Mufawwad tried to force his way in, he would find it impossible. Eventually, he would despair and seek another dwelling. Ẓalim also counted on the store of provisions that he had seen in the hole. Mufawwad had laid them up for his own use, but Ẓalim intended to eat them himself while the siege continued. Ẓalim's wickedness and malignant covetousness prevented him from seeing the folly of his actions. He did not understand that he was exposing himself to the same fate that Mufawwad had intended for the serpent. It was said, "Guard yourself from your own plans against your enemy, as carefully as from their plans against you." Many people have perished in attacks and ambushes that they planned themselves. Many a person has fallen into a well that they dug with their own hands, or has wounded themselves with their own weapons. Mufawwad returned with the brand, but Ẓalim was nowhere to be found. At first, Mufawwad thought that Ẓalim had taken both bundles of sticks to save him trouble, believing himself strong enough to carry the burden. Mufawwad attempted to overtake Ẓalim to help him, but he threw down the brand, fearing that the wind would make it burn away and force him to go find another. He placed the brand in the mouth of his hole for shelter. By this means, the bundle of sticks came into contact with the wood and caught fire. Ẓalim, entrapped in his own snare, was burned within the den. Mufawwad, perceiving the event, exclaimed, "I have never seen a weapon that injures its wielder as severely as injustice. This is why it is said that the unjust man goes of his own accord in search of the knife that is to slay him, and his own feet bear him to the brink of the abyss into which his evil conduct will soon precipitate him." It was also said, "Sovereignty and injustice cannot sit together upon a throne, which they will not soon leave vacant. Every sinner will find one to pardon him, except the unjust, in whose fall all rejoice in unison." Lastly, it was said, "In the end, injustice takes away as much as it gives." Having waited until the fire was burnt out, Mufawwad entered into his den, threw out the carcass of Ẓalim, and continued to dwell there in wakefulness and vigilance, always on his guard against the artifices of traitors. 12. End of the adventure of Abd al-Malik. Now this history, resumed the old man, as closely analogous to the revolt of Amr ibn Said, with regard to his injustice, his treachery against Abd al-Malik, and his entering into the capital of the caliph and strengthening himself there while Abd al-Malik was away. But Abd al-Malik, in advancing to make war against Ibn Zubayr, does the very opposite of what he intends, by strengthening the position of Amr ibn Sa'id's family and leaving the sovereignty to them, while wresting it from Ibn Zubayr. For from now on, the power of Abd al-Malik is the power of Amr ibn Said, and his kingdom is the kingdom of Amr ibn Said. On his part, Amr ibn Said neither supports this campaign of Abd al-Malik nor helps him in it, even though it would benefit him in the long run. In this way, he is acting as Ẓalim acted toward Mufawwad. Abd al-Malik, understanding the parable and reflecting on its moral, was greatly pleased. "You may expect a handsome reward from me," he said to the old man, "for you have already acquired much influence over me. Consider this, therefore, a binding agreement between us. Do not fail to remind me of it in a few days so that I may acquit myself of my obligation." "I do not understand," replied the old man. "I hope that your counsel will do me good service with the caliph, and that I shall then be able to reward you for the assistance for which I acknowledge myself indebted to you," Abd al-Malik said. "And I," retorted the old man, "swear an oath to God that I will never pray for one who is greedy." "How do you know that I am greedy?" asked Abd al-Malik. "Aren't you being greedy?" was the reply. "If you delay giving me this present and reward now when it is in your power to do so? Why don't you give me some of your costly weapons and garments?" "By God, I didn't think of that," answered the caliph. And, ungirding his sword, "Take this," he said, "and you won't lose out, for it is worth 20,000 dirhams. "No, I accept no gifts from those who forget," said the old man. "Let me go, for my Lord God is sufficient for me. He neither grudges nor forgets." The caliph perceived the sincere piety of his companion and exclaimed, "I am Abd al-Malik. Depend upon me, and tell me what you want." "We are both unhappy, O Abd al-Malik," cried the old man. "Let us both hasten to lay our wants before him whom we both serve." The caliph then departed, following the old man's counsel. It was well for him that he did so. 13. Conclusion of the dialogue of Walid. Walid ibn Yazid was greatly impressed by the stranger's talent and wide-ranging knowledge. He asked him his name, but upon hearing it, realized he did not know it. The caliph was ashamed. "Any ruler who has a man like you among his subjects and is not aware of it must be walking in the dark," he said. "O commander of the faithful," replied the stranger, "only those who present themselves to kings and wait at their gates are known to them." "In God's name," the caliph resumed, "do not try to make excuses for us when we do not deserve them." He then gave the stranger a costly gift and made out a written order allowing him to attend court at any time. The caliph listened attentively to the advice the stranger gave, guided by his wisdom and experience, until he met his fate, which is known to everyone. It is related that when the commander of the faithful, Muhammad al-Amin, desired to despoil his brother, Abd Allah al-Mamun, then governor of Khorasan, of his succession to the caliphate, he wrote him a letter informing him that he needed his presence in order to confide to him the conduct of an important affair, and requiring him therefore to set out immediately for Baghdad, leaving in his stead, in Khorasan, a man capable of governing the province with a firm hand. At the same time, the spies that al-Mamun employed in the capital wrote him word that al-Amin wished to deprive him of the succession and designate his own son, Musa, heir to the caliphate. Having received both these letters, al-Mamun took counsel with his viziers, who advised him to try to amuse the caliph and gain time by pretexting the vast extent of the territory of Khorasan, surrounded as it was by infidel nations constantly on the watch for an opportunity of attacking it, and lastly, by pleading that he did not know whom to trust in his stead. Al-Mamun responded to his brother al-Amin's messages in the following manner, informing him that he couldn't come to Baghdad and that he was reluctant to put the matter into writing. Undeterred, al-Amin sent another message to al-Mamun, urging him to come quickly and explaining that he needed his counsel on an important matter that couldn't be conveyed in writing. Al-Mamun shared these letters with his viziers, who, after consultation, had no additional recommendations to offer. Al-Mamun's response to al-Amin was somewhat similar to his previous one. In the meantime, al-Amin's spies in Khorasan reported back to him that al-Mamun had seen through the trap and was preparing to resist with force, and his viziers concurred with his defensive approach. Al-Amin, realizing his inability to ensnare his brother, resorted to imprisoning al-Mamun's household members, supporters, and friends who were in Baghdad, as well as seizing any of his assets that he could lay his hands on. When al-Mamun received news of these developments, he was deeply troubled and convened another council with his viziers. They unanimously reiterated their earlier advice, urging him to stand his ground resolutely and await better circumstances. Al-Mamun heeded their counsel. In response, al-Amin, realizing his brother's determination to resist, promptly summoned his subjects to pledge allegiance to his infant son. They all consented and swore fealty to Musa, who was bestowed with the title, Nadik bil Haq, Speaker of Eternal Truth, although, as some scholars have noted, he was incapable of uttering either truth or falsehood. Al-Amin entrusted the upbringing of his child to Ali ibn Isa ibn Mayan, who had formerly served as the governor of Khorasan for an extended period. Ali had earned the favor of the populace through fair governance and had gained the loyalty of the nobility by his generosity, maintaining a substantial following within the region. When the caliph inquired about the state of Khorasan, Ali provided him with extensive information, concluding that if he, Ali, had been in charge there, no two individuals would have resisted his authority. In response, Al-Amin appointed him as the governor of Khorasan and all other territories he would administer, entrusting him with significant sums of money, a major portion of his armed forces, and an abundance of weapons and ammunition. Upon learning of these military preparations, al-Mamun found himself in a dilemma, as he believed he lacked the necessary strength to confront Ali ibn Isa's forces. He mounted his horse to visit one of his rural estates, where his viziers had gathered to deliberate on the actions to take in this pressing situation. However, while on his way, he was approached by an elderly Persian man, who adhered to the Magian faith. The old man spoke to al-Mamun in Persian and sought justice for some grievance he had suffered. Touched by the man's advanced age, al-Mamun ordered him to be provided with a mount and instructed him to follow along on his journey, assuring him that he would be granted an audience upon their arrival, without the need for further authorization. Once al-Mamun and his viziers had convened in the council chamber, the old man was ushered into their presence and seated on cushions. Al-Mamun then addressed his counselors, apprising them of al-Amin's actions, the incarceration of his supporters, the confiscation of his assets, and the mission of Ali ibn Isa ibn Mayan. Al-Mamun assumed that the old man didn't comprehend Arabic and, given his age and personal concerns, would not be attentive to the council's discussions. The viziers, noting Al-Mamun's lack of suspicion toward the stranger, broached the topic they had gathered to deliberate. The question of what measure should be taken was discussed at length, and one of the viziers offered a suggestion. In my opinion, we should raise foreign troops who are not acquainted with this Ali ibn Isa and confront him with them. Another vizier expressed his perspective, addressing Al-Mamun directly. I believe that you should promptly dispatch messengers to request the caliph's pardon and willingly submit to his authority today. Then, rely on God's assistance for the future. If it becomes evident to everyone that you are relinquishing your claim to the succession under duress, you will possess an irrefutable basis to assert your rights at a more opportune time. One of the viziers proposed, my advice is that you gather all your loyal supporters, and to alleviate their concerns, lead them in an attack on one of the neighboring infidel kingdoms. If we fight valiantly, we may hope that God will grant us victory. Once we secure a powerful state, which will serve as a secure haven, those inclined to join our cause within the caliph's realm will rally to us. We can then maintain our position, continuing the holy war until God's ultimate purpose is achieved. Another vizier suggested, let us retreat to a fortress, where we can defend ourselves and bide our time. Another suggestion was that Al-Mamun should take refuge with the king of the Turks and ask for his protection and assistance against his treacherous brother. Don't all princes act thus when they are in danger and see no way out? Al-Mamun was initially drawn to this idea. He was on the verge of adopting it when he paused to reflect. Shall I be the one? He exclaimed. Shall I be the one to open the door to the Turks to wage war on the Muslims? After he had asked his counselors to leave, they all stood up. Al-Mamun turned to where the old Persian was seated and, seeing him, motioned for him to approach. He then called an interpreter and asked kindly who the old man was and what he wanted. The old man, however, replied in Arabic. O Emir, I came here on my own business, but I have found other business here that is more important and worthy of attention. Al-Mamun replied. Speak freely of all that is in your mind, in accordance with the rules of learning. The old man resumed. O Emir, when I presented myself before you, I could not have been counted among those who loved you. But since then, God has filled my heart with great affection for you. It is said that affection is of three kinds. The first, and most comprehensive, which embraces both the inner and outer man, is that which springs from our origin, namely, love for God, the maker and creator of all things. The second is the result of benefits, namely, the love felt towards a benefactor. The third is the result of coincidence, and there are two kinds. The first is friendship, closely resembling original love, in that it embraces both the inner and outer man, and the second is the love of the subject for his sovereign and of the slave for his master. I beseech you, O Emir, whom I pray God to exalt, that you know that I am bound to you by three kinds of affection, that which embraces both the inner and outer man, that which arises from benefits received, and that which arises by chance. If you will accept my affection, fulfill my hope, gratify my desire, clothe me with the cloak of your confidence, and honor me with the privilege of being counted among your closest friends, you will do so out of pure generosity, and without having any need of me. Yet your servant hopes to be able to requite your benefits by his gratitude, and your condescension by his sincere affection and truthful counsels. What is your religion? Inquired the Emir. I am a Magian, replied the old man. Observing that Al-Mamun was deep in thought, the old man continued, Do not despise me, O Emir, either due to my humble station or the disdain you may hold for my faith. It has been said, never reject a supporter, for regardless of their background, they can be of service to you. They may be either noble or of lowly status. If they are noble, they will enhance your dignity, and if of lower station, they will protect your life and possessions. Furthermore, when I referred to my lowly status in comparison to yours, I did not intend to speak of my character or my lineage. Regarding my character, it is for you, O Emir, to judge whenever you please. Concerning my lineage, know that I am a Brahmin, hailing from the line of Brahmin, a prince among the kings of Persia, occupying a position between them in the supreme first cause. My words were solely meant to convey that my religion might appear inferior in your eyes, and that I live in subjugation as a tributary in a subordinate role. We do not hold any aversion towards you, replied the Emir, and if you decide to transition from this state of subjugation to our faith, we will find an appropriate role for you. I genuinely desire what you propose, said the old man, but I cannot do this at the moment. Perhaps I might consider it at a later time. In the interim, if you allow me to discuss the topic you were recently deliberating with your advisors, I may have insights to share on the matter. Speak on, responded al-Mamun, and the old man continued. I have carefully listened, O Emir, to all the counsels of your viziers. They have endeavored to provide solutions, yet none of their recommendations have fully satisfied me. In that case, please share your thoughts, said al-Mamun. To this, the old man responded, among the teachings passed down from my ancestors, there is one that stands out. The wise person, when faced with a danger so immense that they cannot overcome it on their own, should entrust themselves with a resolute heart to the wisdom of the one who apportions their destiny. This does not mean relinquishing what is rightfully theirs but rather making every effort to protect it. Thus, even if they do not achieve victory, they will, at the very least, shield themselves from blame. Old man, interrupted al-Mamun, it is said that those who lack understanding cannot offer sound advice. We have placed our trust in you without the benefit of prior acquaintance, not because we wish to disregard prudence, but rather to demonstrate our favor by speaking candidly, a gesture signifying our acceptance of your offer. Therefore, we shall inform you that the individual dispatched against us, Ali ibn Isa ibn Ma'in, wields more power in this region than we do. Furthermore, even if we were willing, we are unable to confront him, as the requisite resources are lacking. O Emir, responded the old man, you must dispel these notions from your mind and not lend an ear to those who have proposed them. It is said, he who has grown in stature through injustice shall not continue to grow. He who fortifies himself through wickedness shall not remain steadfast. He who ascends the throne through violence shall not rule. I will now recount to you the tale of someone who gained advantages which, if his example aligns with your situation, you may also attain. Please, proceed, al-Mamun requested, and the old man continued. Kush-Nawaz, the king of the Hephthalites, had a plan to release Firuz, the son of Yezdijerd and the king of Persia, who was his captive. They made an agreement that Firuz would never wage war against Kush-Nawaz or attempt treachery against him. As a symbol of their agreement, they placed a stone at the farthest border of the Hephthalite territory, and Firuz swore never to cross it. Trusting this compact, Kush-Nawaz allowed Firuz to return to his own kingdom. However, once Firuz reached the capital, he felt consumed by shame and disregarded the treaty. He decided to wage war against Kush-Nawaz once again. When he presented this plan to his advisors, they warned him about the consequences of breaking the agreement and the fate that awaited the unjust. Despite their advice, Firuz was determined to proceed. When his advisors reminded him of the oath he swore never to cross that stone, he responded, I swore never to pass that stone. Well, then, I will have it carried by an elephant at the head of my forces, so none of my soldiers shall pass it. Observing Firuz's strong determination and how he was willing to justify his actions with such reasoning, his viziers realized that his judgment was clouded by greed. They chose to remain silent on the matter and decided not to speak to him further regarding this issue. There's a saying, he who is too attached to his own advice will make mistakes, and he who exalts himself above others will be brought low. Intense emotions, like rust, tarnish judgment and prevent it from reflecting the truth. Passion, before it turns into stubbornness, is akin to the influence of alcohol, but once it becomes obstinate, it's comparable to being utterly intoxicated. The one who is a slave to his passions cannot stay on the right path because the intense desires and anger cloud their judgment. This happens because passion, being the older and more deeply ingrained tyrant, has a stronger grip on the soul than reason, which is acquired and comparatively recent. Two veils can obstruct the function of reason. These are covetousness and anger. When reason is not obscured by these, it always oversees and even controls passion. However, if it is once blinded, passion gains complete control without further hindrance. Firuz, the old Persian continued, gathered his 4 satraps, each in command of 50,000 soldiers, and ruling over one of the 4 quarters of the kingdom of Babel. He ordered them to prepare for war against the Hephthalites. When the preparations were complete, Firuz personally led a formidable army against Kush-Nawaz. His army was so powerful that he considered himself invincible. In fact, the king of the Hephthalites could not assemble sufficient forces to confront even one of Firuz's satraps, and his previous victory had only been achieved through a stratagem that doesn't need to be recounted here. Meanwhile, the Mobed, a title signifying the keeper of the keepers of the faith and regarded as a prophet by the Persians, spoke to Firuz, saying, O king, reconsider this campaign. The Lord of all the earth is patient with rulers, as long as their transgressions do not undermine his sacred laws. However, he does not allow them to exceed certain bounds. Respect for prior conquests and the sanctity of treaties are among the fundamental laws of religion. Therefore, king, be cautious and avoid risking your own destruction. But Firuz, regardless of this admonition, and despite the warnings of his most faithful adherents, chose to act according to his own conceit. It is said that 5 signs betoken the fall of a king. First, if he believes the words of gossipers and of those who cannot foresee the outcome of events. Second, if he turns against those whom he ought to love. Third, if his revenue is not sufficient for his station. Fourth, if he favors one and dismisses another from caprice and not from reflection. And fifth, if he despises the counsels of men of wisdom and experience. He who will not listen to a faithful friend makes to himself an enemy. A man will adopt or reject a prudent measure according to whether he has more or less capacity for reflection. He who has much capacity for reflection goes forward in the strength of reason, while he whose brain is weak is dragged along by the force of passion. He who acts without reflection deserves to be numbered with the beasts. The aged Persian thus continued his narrative. Firuz advanced against Kush-Nawaz, reaching the confines of his kingdom at the spot where stood the stone which he had sworn never to pass. He commanded it to be removed and placed on the back of an elephant to march at the head of the army, strictly forbidding anyone from advancing in front of it. He had not gone far from the spot when a retainer came up to inform him that one of his highest-ranking knights had cruelly put to death a poor man, against all reason and justice. The man's brother soon appeared, entreating and imploring Firuz to grant him the vengeance of the law against his brother's slayer. The king commanded that a sum of money should be offered to him as the price of blood, but he replied, "No. Nothing but the blood of my brother's murderer can satisfy me." And when Firuz caused him to be removed from his presence, he instantly hastened to seek the knight and rushed upon him with a khanjar, yataghan, in his hand. On seeing which, the knight turned and fled. Firuz was informed of the circumstance, and while he was marveling at it, the wisest of his viziers suddenly dismounted from his palfrey, kneeled down before the king, who was also on horseback. When Firuz asked him what he wanted, the vizier implored of him a private audience on a subject, as he said, of great moment. The king caused a small tent to be pitched immediately, and having dismounted and entered, he called the vizier and asked him what the matter was. "Most fortunate prince," said the vizier, "may you reign over the 7 climates of the earth and live the life of Biwarasp, with the same glory and power that he enjoyed. The will of the Almighty is now made manifest to you by the example he has placed before your eyes of this brave knight turning to flight at the approach of a poor varlet armed with a knife. What could have caused his flight but the consciousness of his own guilt and injustice?" "No," replied the king, "he did not turn his back from fear of his assailant, but from fear of us, who are not accustomed to leave such guilty deeds unpunished." "If it be so, O king," replied the vizier, "I would suggest to you to summon the knight to meet this man in single combat, giving him security that he need fear nothing from you. Were this poor devil to conquer, would you not consider it a warning sent to yourself by him who sustains all worlds?" "I will assuredly do so," replied Firuz. He then summoned the knight, seeking to encourage him, and commanded him to engage in combat against his accuser. The duel was proposed to the latter, and he appeared well pleased and eager for it. Despite the attempts of the bystanders to make him afraid, saying, "Do you not see his coat of mail, his arms, and his steed? Have you not heard of his fame in horsemanship, his courage, and his prowess in combat? Be aware that you may be risking your life, seeking death. We disclaim any responsibility for your fate." But the unfortunate man replied to them, saying, "Leave us be to settle our matters, for he is riding on the steed of vanity, while I am on that of truth. He is adorned with the armor of doubt, but I am clothed in the armor of confidence. He wields the sword of iniquity, and I carry the sword of justice." "In truth," said the vizier, turning to the king, "the words of this man provide us with a more evident example and warning than even his victory in the duel could. I implore you, your majesty, to spare your knight's life and not subject him to potential harm in this confrontation with the poor man. As for him, O king, try to convince him to accept some recompense for the loss of his brother. If he refuses, then administer justice yourself with your well-known impartiality. In doing so, you may secure the remission of the punishment that the Almighty might have otherwise destined for you, by demonstrating your readiness to deliver the justice that earns his approval, just as any deviation from it arouses his wrath." But Firuz replied, "The single combat must indeed take place. You will witness the outcome when this determined man is still willing to face the trial." The duel was once again offered to the poor man, who desired it as ardently as ever. Even though it was reiterated to him that he might be facing his own death, these efforts to frighten him only served to bolster his courage and eagerness for the contest. "Advance then," cried the onlookers to the knight, "and fear not." The two champions advanced toward each other, and in their initial clash, the foot soldier seized the bridle of the horse. The horseman attempted to strike him with his sword, but the foot soldier evaded the blow by bending his head, causing the sword's point to inflict only a minor wound on his back. Then, swiftly moving to his adversary, he thrust his khanjar at the horseman's throat, seized him, pulled him off his horse, and, as he lay on the ground, delivered a second blow that drove some of the links of his coat of mail into his stomach, ultimately dispatching him. Firuz spent the entire night at that very spot, contemplating what had transpired. Nevertheless, he allowed himself to be driven by his emotions and proceeded with his endeavor. It is said that the beginning of passion is easy, but its ending is miserable. Passion is a tyrant that destroys those it controls. It's like a fire that, once ignited, can hardly be extinguished, or like a swollen river that can no longer be contained within its banks. Do not call someone a captive merely because they have been placed in chains by an enemy. Instead, consider those whose own passions overwhelm them and lead them to their own destruction as the true prisoners. Kushnawaz, continued the old man, having heard of the hostile movements of Firuz, composed his spirit and committed himself into the hands of him who is the beginning and the end of all things. He implored him to vindicate the treaties that Firuz had violated, mocking the consequences that his treachery would bring upon him. Concurrently, he took all the measures that worldly prudence could advise. He strengthened his borders, assembled his forces, and ordered all necessary war preparations. Kushnawaz patiently waited until the enemy, after devastating a significant portion of his territories, reached the very heart of his kingdom, spreading destruction and provoking the ire of his subjects against the invaders. Then Kushnawaz, leading his army, ambushed Firuz and engaged him in battle. He defeated Firuz and put him to flight, liberating the provinces he had occupied. There was a great slaughter of Firuz's followers, the capture of all his baggage, and a pursuit that led to Firuz's demise. Kushnawaz also apprehended his family and the chief of his adherents, concluding the campaign with a resounding victory. 16. Conclusion of the adventure of Al-Mamun. Al-Mamun, understanding the example presented by the old Persian, cheerfully replied, "Your discourse is gratifying and pleasant to our ears, and we appreciate it. What do you think, in the meantime, of the suggestion we offered you, which should lead you to acknowledge the unity of God? He, who has expanded your understanding, opened your mind to contemplation, enabled your tongue to speak words of wisdom, and removed every excuse for remaining ignorant of his revealed will by sending Muhammad to earth. Upon him, as well as upon all those who follow him, may the peace and blessings of God be." Al-Mamun, exceedingly delighted by his conversion, lavished him with gifts, granted him an esteemed position within his own palace, included him among his closest confidants, and requested that he always be present at his court. After a few days, the old man was summoned to the presence of the Almighty. Al-Mamun followed his advice, and God blessed him, leading him to the throne of the caliphs, just as he had hoped. Chapter 2. Fortitude. Verses of Kokan. "I bear witness," responded the old man, "that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is his prophet." Among the most notable chapters of the revelation of our Lord God, may his name be blessed, is one entitled, "The Confederates," which includes several marvelous verses related to the topic of this chapter, consolation to princes in times of public calamity. Thanks be to God, who has guided and directed our thoughts to these verses. Regarding those who aimed to harm his earthly representative, the apostle of his doctrine and counsel, and the instability of those Muslims whose vision was clouded and their minds tainted by wicked thoughts about God, the divine author wrote as follows: "When they came against you, from above you and from below you, and when your sight became troubled, and your hearts rose up to your throats for fear, and you had various thoughts about God. Then were the faithful tested and made to tremble violently. And when hypocrisy began to reveal itself, and the hypocrites, seeing the faithful in distress and confusion, openly displayed what they had previously concealed, God said. When the hypocrites, and those in whose hearts was a disease, said, God and his apostle have promised nothing but delusion." Here's the corrected passage. "And once again, concerning those who refrained from fighting for the faith and abandoned those who were willing to engage in battle. God already knows among you those who hinder others from following his apostle, and who say to their brethren, Come to us, and who come not to battle except a little. Similarly, there is the statement, when a party of them said, O inhabitants of Yathrib, there is no place of security for you here, therefore, return home. And a portion of them requested permission from the prophet to leave, saying, Verily, our houses are defenseless and exposed to the enemy, although their houses were not defenseless, and their intention was nothing but to flee. And regarding those who seek their own gain in times of civil strife, and are prepared to follow anyone who raises their voice and support any new leader, God has stated, if the city had been surrounded by the enemy from nearby areas, and they had been asked to forsake the true believers and fight against them, they would have certainly consented to it, but they would not have remained in that situation for long. Concerning the inability of any other power to resist the force of fate, God has said, say, fleeing will not benefit you if you try to escape death or slaughter, and even if it did, you would not enjoy this world for long. Say, who is there to defend you against God if he decides to bring harm upon you or show mercy to you? They will find no one to be their patron or protector besides God. All these verses pertain to the situation of nations afflicted by some calamity. However, God has provided guidance to those in distress through the teachings bestowed upon his apostle. God has stated, you have an excellent example in the apostle of God. Now, fortitude was one of the virtues enjoined upon the apostle, as the most sublime of authors addressed him with the following words. Before you, messengers were also considered as liars, yet they patiently endured being labeled as such and being troubled until our help reached them. And you have received information about those who were sent before you. God, whose name be praised, also conveyed to his apostle that if he lost courage and ceased to display this virtue in his actions, then nothing he undertook would ever succeed. If their aversion to your admonitions troubles you, then if you can seek out a tunnel into the depths of the earth or a ladder to ascend into heaven by which you could show them a sign, do so, but your quest will be in vain. Furthermore, the Lord made it clear to him that it was his duty to endure the insults of the unbelievers with unwavering fortitude, stating, O prophet, bear the insults of your people with patience, just as our messengers, who were endowed with steadfastness, bore the injuries of their people. And furthermore, these were the individuals whom God has guided, so follow their guidance. This is a topic that leaves no room for doubt. It is reported that the prophet used to say, God has taught me, the Lord has imparted to me a significant lesson. And this lesson, this unequivocal command, was none other than fortitude, as we have explained it here. 2. Tradition of the prophet concerning fortitude. Consider those who are beneath you, not those who are above you, for it is not appropriate for us to disregard God's blessings. These words of the prophet have been transmitted to us, and they are directly relevant to the present topic. To fully comprehend them, we must not limit ourselves to the literal meaning of the precept, neglecting its essence and its universal applicability. Indeed, it has universal applicability, as it directs those with little to look to those who have even less than themselves. Likewise, it advises those who are afflicted to contemplate those suffering from a more severe calamity. Since there is no doubt that, in both cases, the latter are in a less fortunate position than the former concerning the happiness that is the desire of all, it is evident that those less burdened by poverty or any other misfortune enjoy a relatively prosperous and elevated status. We consider someone fortunate when they possess a larger share of fortune's blessings or various personal and social advantages compared to another. Similarly, in times of adversity, we may regard someone as lucky if their circumstances are less severe than those of another, sparing them from the harsher trials to which the other person is subjected. These considerations aim to cultivate fortitude by encouraging the person accustomed to succumbing to every calamity to measure their burdens against those of others. Consequently, not only will their misfortunes appear less dreadful, but they will also be inspired to feel gratitude towards God, who has spared them from the sufferings that weigh down others. This sentiment is of a higher order than simple fortitude, as it not only entails the virtue of endurance but also leads to the satisfaction of thankfulness and fosters the confidence grounded in the recognition of their own happiness, as opposed to mere endurance. The fortitude conveyed in the aforementioned tradition is one that simultaneously fosters endurance and thankfulness. 3. Philosophical maxims in prose and verse concerning fortitude. Fortitude is the paradise of adversity, the virtue of great individuals. Fortitude acts as a stepping stone to patience, while despondency is the slope that leads to ruin. Let the one who possesses insight regard the wealth of this world as borrowed goods that must be returned, as treasures held in deposit that may be reclaimed. If they do not perceive them in this manner, they will be overwhelmed with sorrow when these possessions are lost, and they will unjustly accuse the benevolent ruler who has deprived them of these worldly goods. They should not forget that all individuals have a right to partake in the riches of this world and experience their turn. Therefore, if their wealth should pass from their hands into the hands of others, they should not lament those who accept what fate has bestowed upon them. Instead, they should take solace and endure the good fortune of others with the same patience with which they once observed their prosperity and their own adversity. And for what purpose does the Quran recommend almsgiving, lending, hospitality, and all the various forms of aid that can be offered through wealth, power, or influence if not for the welfare of the benefactors themselves? By giving a portion of their possessions to their neighbors, they ensure the preservation of the rest. There are numerous philosophical maxims on this topic for those who wish to contemplate them. However, I will abstain from discussing them further. Assistance must be sought from God alone. A prince once recited to me the following verses, which he had composed himself during a period of great adversity. Behold us, O sage, accompanying you, who have learned from the alternating expressions of fortune's favor and disfavor, despite our illustrious and influential lineage. Our spirits are elevated, accustomed to the changes of fate, so that they can discover solace even when it seems like all consolation has been denied to us. Subsequently, during one of his moments of distress, he recited these verses of his own composition to me. Fortune favored me, but did not so charm me that I desired to remain her friend for long. Then she turned her back on me, but was unable to dominate me to the extent that her diverse cruelties could elicit even a single word of lamentation. Let us praise God for his wisdom, he continued. Then, turning to me, he said, now complete that verse. And I replied, for my strength is in him, and my abilities are derived from him. On another occasion, while I was debating with him regarding a proposition he had advanced about fortitude, he recited more of his verses on this topic. In response, I quoted the following lines written by the poetess Kanza. Here's the corrected passage. I shall never be able to forget you, O Successor, until I bid farewell to life and visit my tomb. The rising sun constantly reminds me of Successor, and I recollect him every time I see it set. If I hadn't been surrounded by so many individuals who mourned for their loved ones, I might have surely taken my own life. Alas, none of those they lamented resembled my brother. However, through fortitude, I have eased my grief for his loss. These verses, the king told me, are more fitting than those of Talsum ibn Herb. Listen, and he recited the subsequent verses of his own composition. Here's the corrected passage. We advance like waves of plenty, akin to the Nile's flow. Our progression is akin to the clash of swords. And if we encounter a heavy calamity, we endure it with fortitude, as befits lofty souls. 4. Fair garden and excellent arena. Ẓafar, king of Persia and the Roman emperor. It is recounted that Ẓafar al-Akhtaf, the son of Hormuz, made the decision to enter the Roman Empire in disguise to explore it. His most faithful advisors attempted to dissuade him from this endeavor, emphasizing that he should not risk his own life in a mission that could be entrusted to others. However, Ẓafar paid no heed to their advice, ordered them to keep his plan confidential, and prepared to carry it out. It is often said that there are few situations more pitiable than the ministers of young monarchs and elderly individuals infatuated with maidens. It is challenging for young people to transition from the blindness of passion to the path of wisdom for two main reasons. First, because their desires hold a despotic sway over them. Second, because experience has not yet arrived to control their impulses and teach them to resist the influence of passion, as is the case with the wise. The reason why anger and desire hold such dominion over the mind is that they have been its companions since its birth, whereas understanding is bestowed upon it at a later stage and, as a new guest, faces difficulties in asserting control. Consequently, those who attempt to offer good advice to someone consumed by anger or desire are likely to have little success, as the mist of these two passions obscures the light of understanding, much like the effects of drunkenness. As Ẓafar prepared for his journey, he chose a vizier who had served his father before him as his companion. This vizier was a mature, astute, clear-sighted man with extensive experience in various matters, including theology, literature, science, and the strategies of war. He was entrusted with everything Ẓafar deemed necessary for his journey's comfort and pleasure. Ẓafar instructed him to travel separately but remain within close proximity to ensure the safety of his person day and night. Thus, they embarked on their journey toward Syria. The vizier, who was fluent in the Galician language, disguised himself as a monk. He also possessed some knowledge of surgery and carried a unique Chinese balsam known for its remarkable ability to heal wounds and cause them to scar over instantly. Many individuals, as related by the author, attested to the effectiveness of this remedy. One person, in particular, recounted testing it by inflicting a minor cut on themselves, which, when treated with the balsam, promptly closed up. During their journey and even after passing the borders of the Roman Empire, the vizier used this balsam to heal numerous wounded individuals, causing their injuries to rapidly mend. When he encountered people of high standing, he took extra care to tend to their wounds, and after successfully treating them, he refused any form of compensation. As a result, he garnered widespread goodwill in the regions they traversed and gained a reputation as a devout and knowledgeable man. It is often said that the one who sows the seeds of knowledge shall reap fame. Similarly, self-denial leads to glory, reflection to wisdom, gravity to reverence, caution to security, pride to hatred, avarice to contempt, ambition to shame, and envy to a tormented heart. Throughout different eras, places, and belief systems, all societies have consistently praised four virtues: learning, self-denial, generosity, and loyalty. Ẓafar and his vizier, traveling separately as previously mentioned, journeyed through Syria, passed through the gates of Cilicia, and eventually arrived in Constantinople. In this great city, the vizier sought an audience with the patriarch, a title signifying the father of fathers. When questioned about the purpose of his journey, he conveyed his intent to join the patriarch's service, having left Galicia with no other goal. Along with this explanation, he presented a valuable gift, which greatly pleased the patriarch. As a result, the patriarch treated the visitor with great courtesy, extended his friendship, provided luxurious accommodation, welcomed him into his inner circle, and, recognizing the vizier's profound intellect, held him in the highest regard and admiration. In return, the vizier made a point to study the patriarch's character closely, aiming to further win his favor by offering merchandise that catered to the patriarch's preferences and for which he would readily show interest. It is often said that if you wish to gain favor with a person of importance, you should first observe what actions and qualities are likely to attract them and win their admiration. Once you are prepared to employ these methods, approach them with confidence when you are welcomed into their presence. However, exercise caution and patience, and cast your influence discreetly until the opportune moment presents itself, and only then should you make your move to secure their favor. Upon carefully examining the patriarch, the vizier noted that his enthusiasm lay in discussions of canon law, yet he also had a great appetite for hearing extraordinary tales and adventures. Therefore, the vizier started to regale him with a multitude of captivating stories and anecdotes. It was a simple task to gain the patriarch's affection and attach himself firmly to him, akin to the way one clings to their closest bonds. Concurrently, he continued to offer his surgical services free of charge, which further elevated his standing and reputation among the public. It is often said that if it's indeed true that we are naturally inclined to love our benefactors, that affection can sometimes resemble a form of servitude. However, all forms of servitude are distasteful to free individuals. Therefore, one might genuinely consider themselves free when they relieve themselves from the burden of affection owed to their benefactors by making every effort to reciprocate the kindness they have received. Even if their capabilities are insufficient to fully repay these kindnesses, their earnest endeavors will absolve them of any blame in this matter. The vizier persisted in his efforts for the sake of his sovereign, wasting no time. Eventually, an event occurred in which Kaiser arranged a grand banquet, inviting the city's residents according to their social ranks, and those who failed to attend faced potential disgrace. Ẓafar decided to attend to catch a glimpse of Kaiser's countenance, familiarize himself with the court's customs, and witness the opulence of the palace. Despite the vizier's attempts to dissuade him from this venture, Ẓafar donned a disguise that he believed would render him unrecognizable and joined the other guests at the palace. It should be noted that Kaiser, being aware of the remarkable qualities God had endowed Ẓafar with, such as sagacity, magnanimity, and the courage he had displayed from an early age, had long been cautious around him. He even sent a skilled portrait artist to the Persian capital, who captured Ẓafar's likeness in various situations, such as in the halls of his palace and on horseback. Upon returning with these portraits, Kaiser had them reproduced on carpets, curtains, dishes, and goblets. When Ẓafar entered the palace and took his place at the banquet table, sumptuous dishes were served, and guests were offered beverages in crystal, gold, silver, and glass goblets. Among those in attendance was a Roman, a man of great wisdom and keen perception, as well as an excellent physiognomist. Not recognizing Ẓafar and curious about the princely aura surrounding him, he closely observed the stranger's features, demeanor, and overall appearance. As the goblet circulated, one was presented to him bearing the portrait of the king of Persia. The physiognomist examined it and noticed the striking resemblance between the portrait and the features of the unknown guest, gradually becoming convinced that this stranger could be none other than Ẓafar himself. He continued to hold the cup, deep in thought. Without delay, the Roman raised his voice and announced, "The likeness depicted on this goblet has revealed astounding news to me. What is it? What is it? Inquired everyone eagerly. The Roman continued, this portrait suggests that the person it portrays is seated among us. With these words, he fixed his gaze upon Ẓafar, who had noticeably changed countenance. The physiognomist, convinced of his earlier suspicions, discreetly left the gathering and, while still within earshot of Kaiser, reiterated his previous observations. After summoning the physiognomist to his side, Kaiser was assured by the Roman that Ẓafar was indeed present and pointed him out. Therefore, Kaiser ordered the stranger's apprehension and questioned him closely. As Ẓafar tried to evade identification using various excuses, the physiognomist continued to insist, do not trust him, he is Ẓafar without a doubt. Ultimately, under the threat of death, Ẓafar admitted his true identity. It is often said that the discerning intellect of the wise has the ability to unveil mysteries in the blink of an eye. The initial aspect of things can provide numerous indications of their future consequences. Just as an eye, free from the influence of disease, serves as a mirror reflecting the images of current objects, the mind, untainted by the impurities of passion, acts as a mirror that similarly captures the images of many things beyond the grasp of the senses. One of the arguments supporting the idea that God sometimes reveals the future to human intellects is as follows. When an individual anticipates something they either desire or detest, it often occurs very closely to how they had envisioned it. The same is true when, at first glance, we find ourselves experiencing an inexplicable fondness for someone who has neither helped nor harmed us, and an aversion to another who has neither benefited nor wronged us. With the passage of time, we may indeed receive a favor from the former and an injury from the latter. Upon Ẓafar's acknowledgement of the truth of the physiognomist's assertion, Kaiser decided to imprison him. However, he instructed that Ẓafar should be treated with respect. Kaiser then ordered the construction of a device in the form of an enormous bull, made from 7 layers of hide. This contraption featured a small window underneath and a trap door at the back for entry and exit, as well as for delivering food to the person inside. Ẓafar's wrists were secured with a golden chain that hung from his neck. This chain was crafted in linked segments, allowing him to use his hands for self-feeding and other purposes. He was placed inside the hollow interior of the machine.